Hello and welcome to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with Jen Curtis. I am back. I am finishing mat leave and getting back into work. My daughter's just doing half days at the moment, so not back to work full time, but from next week, I'm going to be back to work full time. And I finally have some headspace to think about work and all the things that I want to do this year. And one of the main ones is produce podcast episodes. I had produced a couple of episodes while I was away on mat leave. I intended to do one a week, but I just had nowhere near enough time for that. And the odd one here and there that I did make was really rubbish because I just couldn't concentrate. So now I'm back and hopefully going to be putting out regular podcasts for you guys. I thought a good place to start, since I'm just getting back into things, is to start right at the beginning. Like, how many calories do you need to lose weight? I've already done an episode on what you need to do to lose weight and explaining like the how and the why of all of this. But in this podcast episode, I want to talk to you specifically about how you know how many calories do I need to lose weight? Like, what's the magic number? Like, is it 1,200? Is it 1,500? Like, what do I need to know? I'm also going to talk about a couple of the biggest mistakes and most common mistakes I see people making, so that you know what not to do as well. And keep in mind that I have a really great email course on how to lose body fat, and that I'm going to link in the comment section below, so that if you just want me to take you step by step through this process and you just want to know all the rest of the process, then you just want to sign up to that course and I will take you through it over a number of emails. Okay, so let's dive right into the topic. Let's first of all talk about the biggest mistakes that people make and how not to figure out how many calories you need to lose weight. So the biggest mistake is that most women will go and get something like MyFitnessPal, and men do this as well. And they go through the onboarding process of MyFitnessPal. They put in all their figures, and then MyFitnessPal asks them a question. It says, how much weight do you want to lose per week? And it gives you the choice between half a pound, or 2 pounds. So like a quarter of a kilo, half a kilo, or a whole kilo every week. And so obviously you go 2 pounds or a whole kilo. Like, obviously, why would I want to lose weight slower? So then in order to lose that much weight each week, you would have to be in an enormous deficit. So normally that means 1,000 calorie deficit, more or less, or like a 40% deficit or more for most people. So then MyFitnessPal also just caps it at 1,200. So if you actually would need 800 calories a week to lose weight, then MyFitnessPal will tell you that you need 1,200, even though you need a lot less than that to burn like 2 pounds a week. For most people, that rate of fat loss is just not sustainable, and you'd have to be in a huge calorie deficit in order to do that. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to decide how fast you want to lose weight and then decide what your deficit is based on that. You want to actually do the opposite thing. You want to figure out how much of a deficit you can tolerate, and then however much weight you lose per week is however much weight you can lose per week, even if it's only 100 grams. And I'll explain how to figure that out in just a moment. And the other big mistake is expecting to lose a pound or a kilo or 2 pounds every week, right? That is not what fat loss normally looks like. Fat loss is going to be up and down. Sometimes you'll lose just 300 grams. Sometimes you'll lose no weight at all. Sometimes you'll lose a kilo. It isn't linear and it isn't orderly. It's kind of a little bit all over the place. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen my chart of my fat loss that I've shown over and over again during my fat loss journey, this time postpartum. And it's just up and down, but you can see a trend going down. But the actual weight itself is really quite schizophrenic all the way down. It just goes up and down and up and down. It's all over the place. It doesn't come down in a nice, neat line. But the expectation that it will be linear often really throws people off, because then when they gain a bit of weight, or when the weight goes up for no reason, or when it doesn't come down, they get really frustrated and they give up. So you have to go into it with the expectation that it's going to be a bit wiggly and wonky and all over the place. Also, a pound or a kilogram or 2 pounds is such an arbitrary amount of weight. It's like, I think in our minds, it seems like a sensible or a very small amount because it's just one. But it's actually a really arbitrary, like, why not 0.9 of a kilo? Why not, 0.9 of a pound? Like it's very, very arbitrary to be like on the head that amount, right? It's going to be all over the shop. It's not going to be an exact nice round figure, especially not week after week. Okay, so now we've talked about what not to do. Let's talk about what you should do instead. Okay, so there are 3 steps to this process. Step 1 is to first of all figure out your maintenance calories. Okay, so when I talked about the mistakes people make, they dive straight into how much do I need to lose weight? But you need to take a step back from that first. There's a preliminary step before you figure out your deficit. And that is to figure out how many calories you need to maintain your current weight, right? Your maintenance calories, okay? This is also known as your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure. And it's made up of a few different things, right? I won't go into too much detail in this video, but basically it's your basic metabolic rate, how much energy you burn just from like living and breathing and your heart beating and stuff like that. Your activity levels, like how much you move around, which can be measured roughly and crudely by the number of steps you do each day. Your TEF, which is the thermic effect of food, which is how many calories you're burning from digestion. And the final thing is from exercise, right? There are the 4 ways that you burn calories. But I'll go into that more in a different video. The most important thing to take away from that is that you will have a total daily energy expenditure, and that's your maintenance calories, okay? And you absolutely, most women sort of like eye roll and go, oh, like, why do I need to know that? But you need to know what that is first. And that's because we are all different shapes and sizes, right? We all have different starting points, okay? Some of you may have just 5 kilos to lose. Some of you might have 50 kilos to lose, right? If you're carrying a lot of excess fat around, you're going to be burning more calories than if you have less weight and fat that you're actually carrying around. The really, really, really big factor is how tall you are, right? So if you're just 5 foot tall, you are, and you're a small frame, you are going to burn way fewer calories than a woman who is 5'9" or 6 foot tall, right? Even though that's really, really rare. There's a huge difference. Like the 5 foot woman and the 5'10" woman, they aren't just, it's not just like the height that's different, it's everything, the frame, the bone, the amount, there's more of you. The bigger you are, the more of you there is. Even if you were both as lean as you wanted to be, like both of you exactly the same body fat percentage, 20% body fat, the small woman is going to weigh like 45 kilos and the 5'10" woman is going to weigh like 70 kilos, right? So there's like a whole third of her more. She has more of everything. She has more bone density. She has not necessarily more bone density, but more actual bone, right? More actual matter. She's going to have more muscle mass. She's going to have, her organs are going to be bigger. Like everything's going to be bigger. So she is going to burn more calories. So if you're 5 foot tall and not very active, you might only need 1,600 calories in order to maintain your weight, right? Which is really, really, really low. And if you're very, very big, right? If you are 5'10", if you have 20 kilos to lose, so you're carrying a lot of excess weight, which is going to increase your calorie expenditure. If you do 12,000 steps a day and if you work out 3 times a week, right, your maintenance calories could be as high as like 2,500. They're probably a bit lower than that, probably like 2,300, something like that. But they're going to be quite high. Whereas if you're small and inactive, and you're not exercising, you're doing 5,000 steps a day, you've only got 5 kilos to lose, like your maintenance calories might just be 1,600 calories, right? So that's quite a big range. Just to maintain her weight, the tall woman needs way, 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 way more calories than the small woman. That might seem unfair, but first of all, life's unfair. That's just how it is. Second of all, the woman who's much smaller will have a much, 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 much smaller appetite. Her appetite will reflect her calorie needs. I have 2 other podcast episodes on smaller women and larger women that go into this in more detail. But long story short, we are all going to have different calorie needs and different maintenance calories based on those really big factors of your actual size, your activity levels, and how much you exercise each week. They're the main factors that go into it. And again, it could be anything from between 1,600 calories and 2,300 calories. But for most women, it's going to be around between 1,800 and 2,000 calories. I would say 80% of my clients fall between 1,800 calories and 2,000 calories. And then a very small, maybe 20% fall outside of that range. So most people do tend to cluster around the mean. Before I move on to step 2, I want you to go down into the comment section. I put a link for a really basic calorie calculator in there. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Put your details, put your age, put your weight, put your height, put all that stuff in there. And before you carry on with this podcast, go and find out what your maintenance calories are with that link. So press pause, do that now, and then press play again. Okay, so step 2, figuring out your deficit. Okay, so for the vast majority of you, you are going to be able to tolerate a 20% deficit. Okay, so for that 80% of you that cluster around a maintenance calories of 1,800 to 2,000 calories, okay, you are probably going to do really well on a 20% deficit. So let's just do the easy maths. If it is 2,000 calories a day, 20% of that is 400 calories. So if you deduct that from your maintenance calories, that leaves you with a calorie target of 1,600 calories. That should be your target. So again, a lot of people, most women are going to have a calorie target of between 1,500 and 1,600. It's not really very exciting. And once you've been over these numbers over and over and over again, you start to see that everyone has like pretty much the same calorie target. And it really just doesn't vary that largely from human to human. It does vary quite largely between men and women because men are bigger than women on average and they have more muscle mass and bone density on average. So they tend to have higher calorie targets. But I'm just talking about women here, although all of this information also applies to men. You will probably do really well on a 20% deficit, and it will probably be between 1,500 and 1,600 calories. So that's really, really simple, okay? Just figure out, just doing the numbers in your head, just take out your calculator, put your maintenance calories in. Let's say it said 1,850, times that by 0.8, and that will give you a 20% calorie deficit. Let's talk about a few exceptions. So if you are exceptionally small and inactive, so let's take as an extreme example, you're 5 foot tall, and you're quite inactive and you're not doing any exercise, and your calorie target is 1,600, 1,700. Your maintenance calories. You are probably going to really struggle with a 20% deficit, even though by doing it by percentage, that automatically makes it a smaller amount that you're deducting from your overall total. So, 20% of 1,600 is a lot less than 20% of 2,300, right? So that automatically makes it a percentage and a proportion of your maintenance calories that is proportional to your size and your calorie needs. As opposed to some people say just deduct 500 calories. But 500 calories is a much bigger proportion of 1,600 calories versus, if you take 500 calories off of 2,300, it's a much smaller proportion of that maintenance calorie. So it's much better to do it according to a percentage of your maintenance calories. So, but if you are very, very small. You may still find it hard to do 20%. So you might need to start with a much smaller percentage. So 10 to 15% might be a better calorie deficit for you if you are on that lower calorie, maintenance calorie range. It might be better to have a much smaller deficit because again, just everything is smaller for you. Like your appetite's going to be smaller, your range is going to be smaller, and the amount of body weight you're going to lose each week is going to be smaller. The same is true if you are very lean already. So really, if you're just trying to lose the last 5 kilos, or if you're just trying to go from being quite slim to being like really quite defined and lean. So if you're around 22% body fat and you want to get like sub 20% body fat, this is going to apply to you as well, right? This is where I'm at in my fitness journey. I'm only about 3 or 4 kilos away from like my ideal body weight. So I may not be able to tolerate the bigger calorie deficit of 20%, and I may need to cut to like a 10 to 15%. Why does this happen? This happens because as you get leaner, your body produces more hunger hormones and less satiety hormones, driving up hunger, making it a lot harder to lose the last bit of body fat. I'll do a separate video on what to do if you're very lean. Then if you are carrying the opposite end of that spectrum, if you're carrying a lot of excess body fat, you may be able to tolerate a much higher calorie deficit. So if you are like 50% body fat, you might be able to tolerate a 50% calorie deficit. The more body fat you have, the more your body will drive down hunger by, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. So the opposite happens of when you're lean. Your body will, the more body fat that you have, the more your body produces satiety hormones and suppresses and suppresses hunger hormones, because you don't need as much food because your body has a lot of stores. Okay, so it's an inbuilt mechanism to keep us within a certain body fat percentage range, although today we tend to eat past that, those natural signals, so we don't have that natural buffer in anymore. Okay, so if you are very overweight or very obese, you may be able to tolerate a bigger calorie deficit. Okay, so more than 20%, so 25, 30, 40, or even 50%. Now, I'm not saying, if you need 2,300 calories a day to maintain your weight because you're quite active, to just slash your calories in half and aim for like 1,200 calories or 1,100 calories. I'm not saying that, but you just do bear in mind that while that 20% calorie, with most of my like overweight or obese clients, I might push them more towards a 30% calorie deficit in the beginning. And if we get into really good habits and into a really good rhythm with things, we can start to reduce from there to get faster results. But sometimes faster results comes with always faster results comes with more restriction, which makes the diet harder. So there's a trade-off there. So there isn't a right or wrong answer. You obviously can't push through hunger. You have to make sure that you're eating enough to fuel your daily activity and to make sure that you're not struggling with hunger, because that's what makes most people fail on a diet. And I'll do another video on that. But just know you may be able to push it a little bit further. So if you do a 20% calorie deficit, you might sort of feel like absolutely like I'm really full, especially if you're prioritizing filling nutritious foods. And then you might find you might be able to push the number a little bit lower than you initially set. So just keep that in mind, and you definitely don't want to over restrict yourself, but you may be able to get away with a deeper deficit than more lean individuals can. So at this point in the video, I want you to pause again and figure out that 20 or 10 to 30% deficit based on the things that I said before, off of your maintenance calories, and then press play again. Before we move on to the third step, I just want to pause for a moment to say, to tell you what a reasonable amount of weight loss to expect is. Because a lot of people, again, I talked about in the beginning about how most people expect it to be 1 pound or 1 kilo, but that's actually a really arbitrary figure, because, you know, a kilo for somebody who's very lean is a lot, but a kilo for somebody who's very obese might not be a lot. Okay, so, or somebody like a kilo for somebody who weighs 50 kilos is a big percentage of their body weight, whereas a kilo for somebody who weighs 100 kilos, it's a much smaller percentage of their body weight. So it's completely arbitrary to expect 1 pound or 1 kilo every week. So what you should expect instead, if you get into a good cadence with your fat loss, if you're consistent, if you find a healthy balance between not eating too little, but so that you get really hungry, but not eating too much that you're not actually losing weight, you'll be able to see between 0.5% and 1% of your body weight loss per week. So between 0.5% and 1% of your body weight loss each week. What that means in practice, if you weigh 70 kilos, you can expect to see 0.35 to 0.7 of a kilo weight loss each week. If you weigh 200 pounds, you can expect to see between 1 and 2 pounds fat loss a week. Okay, so 0.5% to 1% of your body weight each week. That also means that if you weigh 50 kilos and you're looking to lose 5 kilos because you're tiny, 0.5% is going to be 0.25 of a kilo, and 1% of your body weight is going to be 0.5 of a kilo. So that would be the expected range that you would expect to see. Again, we want to work off a proportion of your body weight and not some arbitrary number that is a different proportion of different people's body weights. The other thing I wanted to say before we move along to step 3 is, again, to check out the email course that I have on this topic, where I take you step by step through all of this, and then, you know, a bunch of other steps afterwards and a bunch of other things that you need to think about and prioritize for losing body fat. Okay, so step 3 of this process is to monitor and adjust. Okay, so this is really important. Feedback along the way is so important. And you're going to need a few pieces of feedback. You're going to need to be weighing yourself every morning to see what the fluctuations are and to find if there's a trend going in the right direction. You want to be able to look at weekly averages. You want to be able to look at the lowest weight each week. Again, I can delve into this more in another podcast, but that's the basic idea. You also are going to need pieces of biofeedback, like, are you really fucking hungry? Because if you're starving hungry, you're either not filling enough foods and filling enough meals, or you're eating too few calories, or both. Or there's some other lifestyle factor like not sleeping enough. Actually, those are the 2 major things that you need to monitor. I'd also recommend that you monitor like your certain measurements over a period of time. It's a really good idea to take pictures of yourself, even if you don't share them with anyone, just because month to month it can change. You want to take some crude measurements like, you know, waist circumference and thigh and things like that, especially if you do have a lot of weight to lose, and especially if you're strength training and getting stronger in the process. That's really important. You can also use skin fold measurements or body fat percentage measurements. Some scales do that quite well, but a lot of them do it really poorly. Again, I'll make a separate episode on that. But the main ones you want to cover are your daily weigh-ins, first thing in the morning, after doing a wee, before eating or drinking anything, without any clothes on, and how you're feeling in terms of energy levels and hunger. If you've got the right number of calories, you should be losing between 0.5 to 1% of your body weight each week. And in terms of biofeedback, you shouldn't be hungry, right? When I say that, it's a little bit confusing or misleading sometimes, because you will get hungry, right? You will get hungry as you lead into your next meal. So if you eat 4 times a day at, say, 8 a.m., 12 o'clock, 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., you will get hungry as you get close to your next meal. So within like an hour to half an hour of your next meal. But you should only be like a 6 out of 10, a 6 or 7 out of 10 in terms of hunger, and then you should eat, right? You shouldn't be getting like a 10 out of 10 in terms of hunger, or you shouldn't be starving hungry, or you shouldn't spend big portions of the day starving hungry and thinking about food. You should feel full after your meals, and you should be full, you should feel satisfied and not be hungry and thinking about food until you do actually get within about half an hour of your next meal. This is something that's really hard for people to find the balance with, because most people tend to spend their entire lives just never, ever, ever hungry. They're always eating before they're hungry. And then when they go on a diet, they think that the idea is to be as hungry as possible and to just endure hunger all the time. And then they fail miserably. So you have to find that sweet spot and that sweet balance between not being too hungry, but you are actually going to have to experience hunger some of the time if you're in a calorie deficit. And if you're never, ever, ever hungry, you probably need to cut your calories a bit lower. You're probably eating a bit too much. There are other factors that go into how hungry you are. The most important one being how filling your meals and your food is. But I will do another podcast episode on how to not be hungry while dieting, because it's a really important topic that most women don't prioritize. So you're going to be monitoring those two things in particular: your weight. Are you losing weight? Is the trend going down? And the second thing is how hungry you are. If you're not hungry at all, you need to reduce your calories. If you're hungry all the time, you got to either increase your calories or eat more filling foods, or both. I also see a lot of coaches online who sort of say, like they do a fat loss phase and they're telling other people how to do it, but then they never actually lose weight themselves. Like the weight goes down a little bit and then it goes up over the weekend, and they seem to gain and lose the same 5 pounds. And they just dismiss it and say, oh, look, I feel like I'm getting leaner, or, oh, look, I may not have lost any weight, but, I'm feeling better, and subjective stuff. And while it is important to also be looking at how your clothes fit and how you look in the mirror, and if you're going from not lifting weights to lifting weights, you may lose significant amounts of body fat without actually losing any weight. Like if you're really doing a very optimized program, that could definitely happen. And I've had that happen with a lot of clients. But if you're already quite trained, you're not going to be gaining tons and tons and tons of muscle mass. And you're definitely not going to be gaining enough to offset the amount of fat that you should be losing if you are in a 20% deficit across the week. So on the one hand, people tend to be really crazy about, oh my God, today the scale went up by 1 pound or by half a pound, or like, I completely give up. There's no point doing this. And they sort of like lose their minds and have a tantrum and throw all their toys out the pram. So people have these crazy spasms over like very small fluctuations that really don't matter in the big scheme of things. They're not able to zoom out. But on the other hand, a lot of people have like too much self-confidence and sort of dismiss the fact that they're doing this fat loss phase, but they're not actually losing weight, and they try and like rationalize it, and they're just too much in that rational part of the brain, like over rationalizing this. They actually do need to go, okay, I'm not losing weight over a number of months. I'm not actually in a calorie deficit. I need to monitor and adjust. Anyway, the central idea being that once you plug all your numbers into these calorie calculators and you figure out your 20% or 10% or 30% deficit, there is nothing magical about these numbers. So many people want to know like the magic number for them, but it's normally not that interesting. It's normally not that far away. Even if I did go into a really complicated calculator and figure it all out and take loads of different variables into account, it's normally between like 50 to 100 calories away from what the less accurate calculator said anyway. So like people need to stop obsessing so much about getting the perfect number for them, and they just need to look at what they get kind of a ballpark figure and an idea, figure out that 10 to 20%, 30% deficit that they should be doing. That's a good guesstimate for them. And from there, it's probably going to be right. But if it isn't, you need to be monitoring your progress. You need to be monitoring your biofeedback. And from there, you adjust your calorie target accordingly. Are you not losing weight? Are you never hungry? You probably need to decrease your calories. Are you losing weight really, really rapidly and you're starving? You might need to increase your calories slightly because it's not sustainable. Are you really, really, really hungry, but not losing weight over the course of a week, 2 weeks? You're probably not eating filling enough foods and you need to eat more filling foods. And you're also probably not in a calorie deficit, but you'll need to eat more filling foods in order to be not hungry on fewer calories. So this process isn't static. It's not like you just plug your numbers into MyFitnessPal, it says 1,200 calories, and then that's the magic number. You either hit that number or you don't bother. This is like a living, breathing thing, right? You need to figure out what your maintenance calories are. You need to figure out like how big a deficit you can tolerate from there, because some people can tolerate a bigger deficit than others, partly because of like how lean they are or how small they are. But sometimes we just have genetic differences in hunger. So some people can just tolerate a bigger deficit than others just because they're genetically able to do so. So you might only be able to tolerate a 10% deficit, even if you're quite big and have quite a lot of weight to lose. That's just the way it is. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And you're going to have to work with what you've got, because even though it would be really nice to be in a 30% deficit and lose weight faster, if you're not able to sustain it because you're so hungry, it's just not going to happen and you're not going to actually do it. So you have to monitor and adjust as you go along. I would recommend, if over a week, I think a week is enough time, especially in the beginning, to see what's going on. And you should see a drop either in your lowest number that week or in the average that week, or both. And if you don't see a drop in either, then even if it's just by 0.1 of a kilo, right? It doesn't need to be by very much. If you're not seeing a drop in either over the course of a week, you're probably not actually in a calorie deficit. And you either need to drop your calories a little bit further or you're not tracking properly. I think a lot of coaches would argue with me on this and they'd say you'd need to do it for a longer period of time. But I do think you should be seeing progress on the scale from week to week. Sometimes you won't, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need to cut your calories, but you should really from week to week be seeing some progress in that range of 0.5% to 1% of your body weight if you are doing things optimally. And sometimes you might see less of a drop. And sometimes you'll see the same weight. That's okay, but you do want to be seeing progress from week to week in general. The final thing that I want to say is that you do need to be in a weekly deficit, and you want to focus on a weekly deficit rather than hyper-focusing in on the individual day. This is a point I'll expand on in another episode. But basically, if you need 2,000 calories a day to maintain your weight, that's 14,000 calories across the week. So if you kind of go over one day, by 100 calories or by 200 calories, it might matter and make your deficit much smaller on that particular day. But over the course of a week, when you need to eat 3,000 calories less over the course of the week, it doesn't really matter and it doesn't affect things that much. So you need to always have that bird's eye weekly view on like trying to create a weekly deficit of around a 20% deficit, rather than being too stuck on the individual day. So while you do want to have a daily goal and try and hit that goal, if you do go over one day by 100 calories, 200 calories, or if you hit maintenance calories, it's not the end, or even if you go over, it's not the end of the world. You can still achieve a weekly deficit if you just keep going and try to create a deficit on the other 6 days that week. And the opposite is true as well. You can be really good all week and create like a 500 calorie deficit or a 25% deficit 5 days of the week. But then at the weekend, you go into 100% surplus. You're going to blow out your calorie deficit and end up on maintenance calories for the week. So eating those 14,000 calories across the 7 days. So you do need to be making sure that you're in a weekly deficit, in a monthly deficit, in a 3 monthly deficit, in a yearly deficit, right? Over the course of however many months that you need to get to your goal, you need to be in that 20% or in some kind of deficit, even if it's less than 20%. So always stay with the big picture in mind. One particular day doesn't really matter. And remember, 1 pound, 1 kilogram, it's so arbitrary. Some weeks you might only lose 0.1 of a kilo, you might lose 0.5 of a kilo, and it probably will be, it's a good idea to think of it in terms of a percentage of your total body weight. Don't forget my email course. I will link it in the comments below and in the description below for those of you on YouTube. It's a really, really, really great email course that takes you through these different steps. So day 1 is figuring out your maintenance calories and then your deficit calories. And then each day I give you another tip and another big thing to focus on your fat loss journey. And these are the things that my most successful clients do to get really, really, really great results. So make sure you sign up for that fat loss email course, because this is just the start, right? Figuring out the right number of calories for you is really just the start. And there's so much more to it, but it is a really important first step to the process. If you have any questions, please send them to me any way that you want, on YouTube, on Instagram, by email. Like, you can send it to me any way you want, and I'll be creating a podcast episode each week to go through some question that gets asked to me a lot.